And welcome back to a new episode of the Geek Centurions in the new year. It's me, your boy Eli,
It's me, Joe.
and we're here to talk about essentially a topic that's been going around for a while. I've been meaning to talk about, have a dedicated episode about this. You probably know about the title and probably have heard us talk about it on occasion, and it's whether or not fan input is needed in sort of in these big name projects. So the reason this came out is because recently, on for The Last of Us, right? New show based on a very popular video game. It's gonna be out on HBO Max, or is it or HBO?
Yeah.
One of
Yeah.
both.
Yeah,
Both.
yeah.
Let's just about to say both. And it is like I said, very beloved franchise. It's a video game that is beloved by many. It is broken barriers in a sense. It's pretty much started the whole like cinematic look to a lot of Sony games.
Yeah. It has had a lot of impact. It is, you know, very highly critically acclaimed in its storytelling, and you know, I do agree. It definitely has had an impact on a lot of Sony games. Like, I mean, a lot of people were calling the God of War, this new God of War reboot series, very inspired by The Last of Us. I mean, think about it.
Mm-hmm.
Older man, young kid, has to take care of him. Father's, relationship. That third person perspective instead of that sort of a more like action,
Mm-hmm.
like God of War. Like the first three God of Wars are very different from
Current God of War.
Current God of War. And that obviously causes a lot of divide between God of War fans, right? There's some that still love that original God of War trilogy,
Mm-hmm.
and some like, no, I like the new direction. God of War needs to change and adapt and evolve in this new market and stuff. And it's like, it's just very interesting, all things considered, very interesting. But yeah, no, yeah, Last of Us has been very influential and has been very, like, a lot of fans, I think, have always been saying like this should be a Last of Us movie or a TV show, and yeah, now we're getting one.
Yeah, and so this is where the sort of conversation / controversy comes in. One of the heads of the show said that, and I'm paraphrasing really, so you can find the articles out there, the comment that he said,
Mm-hmm.
and it's that unlike video games, are with you'll feel more bits with real people rather than pixels, something that's not real.
Yeah, I believe he was like, you feel more emotion than just watching a bunch of pixels die or whatever.
And so that sort of went into spiral to many different conversations, whether or not, should people, should people take video games more seriously? If it's, if it's the same thing, it's storytelling even without the, you still feel like emotional reaction even though it's not a real person being harmed, or something that's not in real life. But the one that I've seen mostly circulating and kind of comes back to the comments made with The Witcher, and to an extent even the Halo show that we did talk about.
Mm.
And it's that these people don't really engage with the source material, and oftentimes just do the kind of their own thing with it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, granted, a lot of people saying this is why you need someone who is a fan, because, for example, Henry Cavill, who is like a really good actor in his right,
Yeah.
he's a big fan of whatever thing he's attached on, especially if it's something like nerd culture, like The Witcher. He loves the books.
Mm-hmm.
He was very adamant about some of the changes that were made that didn't fit well with what the books were.
Very it rubbed them the wrong way kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and so hence why he left, because of creative differences. And it's been outed that the people who who were in charge of The Witcher were people who didn't really like the books or never really played the games. Now the games are separate kind of thing, obviously, right?
Yeah, and to be fair, the whole Witcher conversation becomes even more funnier when you look at the creator of the Witcher books, and he hates the games.
Yeah.
He hates the games, so it is a very funny sort of thing where like people love the games. Like people didn't even know The Witcher was based on books until a couple years later, where it's like, oh yeah, these are based on books. Oh, really? That's cool. And the creator is like, I hate the games. I don't like them. And now you have this TV show, which is people who apparently aren't really that fans of the books or have played the game. So it's just it's a lot of funny moving parts going around.
Yeah, and it begs a question as to like, because I've known people who like read the books, who've played the games, specifically for The Witcher, right? And how they didn't agree with a lot of the changes that they've done. Like, it makes no sense. Like, they killed off a certain character who shouldn't have been killed off. He has a very important role in the story of Geralt, and so on and so forth. Now, for us personally, obviously, we had the Halo show.
Yeah, and obviously, I think when that show was going through some development hell for a while, and then as we started to get more news and stuff like that, it was like, hey, this is going to be in its own timeline, the Silver timeline.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to have its own little sort of story and have its own bit of direction, which I think
for a lot of people seemed like a cop out.
A little bit, yeah. Like, want a cop out to be like, this is why it's different, kind of thing. But also just it felt like a way to at least appease fans of like, hey, listen, whatever stuff happens in the show, it's non-canon to the actual Halo universe, so you don't have to worry about whatever shenanigans happen in this show. It doesn't mean much for the games, right? Which, I mean, yeah, on the one hand, yeah, it is a cop out. You're kind of just like, well, I wanted like an actual accurate, like, well, at least somewhat accurate representation of the Halo story in media, like, but. I mean, sure, as long as it probably sticks true to what Halo is and does whatever it wants.
And we're gonna come back to that theming, right? The whether it sticks true to what this thing is, right? So, because like I think that's a lot of thing that a lot of people would ask for and a lot of people would want, right?
Yeah.
Like, hey, can you at least well, we're fine with changes, but at least keep the core, theme of whatever you're adapting on. Stay. Right?
Yeah.
And so, like, obviously with Halo, that was you and I both grew up with the games. We played almost every one of the games. Went to the Halo events.
I think it was the Halo experience that they had.
Yeah.
That was touring around the country back in 2019.
Yeah.
That was pretty cool. But yeah, it's it was a very interesting experience watching that show.
Yeah, and like you guys can go back and like watch all those episodes that we've done about it, because I feel like those were some of our more like critical aspects of that show. Like, I think like we tend to be more chill than critical, I feel. But that was one where like, okay, we gotta like sit down and talk about how kind of bad this is.
Yeah, as like actual like really big fans of Halo, it you had to like sort of come into it and be sort of like, all right, there's a lot of things that are potentially cool about this show, but there's a lot of things execution wise were just not great.
No, not great at all. Like there was a lot of things like I did, like we talked about this. We were not that bothered when they had to reveal Master Chief's face, because in the context of the story, okay, you got to show you have to trust this girl. This is how you trust him. Like, hey, if you want a clear shot, you kill me now. I'm wearing fucking armor, right? You're not. That armor's not gonna. That bullet's not gonna do anything to my armor. So like, if you want to headshot, there.
Yeah, like
there.
Obviously, yeah. I think people kind of figured they would do a face reveal kind of thing, because like, it's just. I feel like for modern like studios and stuff, it's very hard to do a fully masked helmet sort of character. I mean, I know Mandalorian has done that very well
for the most part.
But
I think Judge Dredd is the one that really mastered that.
Yeah, I think so too. But more to the point, yeah, it's sort of something that I think most Halo fans were like willing to accept that it was probably gonna happen. Best case scenario, you don't want it to happen, but it's like, all right, maybe one face reveal and then put the helmet back on, bud.
And that's it. And that's what we thought it was, and then it kept going, and then it started taking these turns into things that were like, okay, but this doesn't seem anything that reminds me of Halo, right? Even in like even if you're just a casual like Halo fan or someone who casually like is into like Halo, right?
Mm-hmm.
All you know is shoot aliens, and that's it, right? And but like if you were to go more into like in depth of the lore and what the story of the Spartans, the Forerunners, the Covenant, it's a lot more interesting and a lot more like what's the word I'm looking for? Like where they're all just like it's a lot more weaved well, I would say.
There's more of a like the world building is a bit fascinating.
Yes, the world building is fascinating. There's not much in the Halo show. It tries to, but it's tries to play you like oh, but we don't you, but like keeping it hush hush, not really saying much. Like even their explanation of the Spartan program, which in the original books, in the original series timeline, I guess probably be the better way to say it. It's sort of like a gray line of events. It's like, yeah, it's just kind of messed up that this is happening. That the Spartans are essentially super cops meant to stop rebellions.
Well, they were originally designed to do that, yeah, because there was a huge insurrection thing going on like before the Covenant show up. And Dr. Halsey was sort of tasked to create the Spartan 2 program, which would have initially been used to fight the insurrectionists, but obviously the Covenant attack, and then that's when they sort of shift gears to just using the Spartans to fight the Covenant now because they were perceived to be the bigger threat. But yeah, I mean, there's just a lot of things with the Halo show. Mm-hmm. I mean, they kind of touched on that a little bit. But I don't know. It's just like there's a lot of weird directions they take with it. I mean, heck, the Covenant themselves, who are supposed to be the big bad threat, are kind of just honestly feel like set dressing for a little bit. I mean, in that first episode, like we see them, do Covenant things. Like it feels like they're an actual threat. Mm-hmm. And you really need the Spartans to fight them, but then you have others, and they just don't really do much. It feels like when there needs to be a big action sequence, you just bring the Covenant in, and then when you don't need that, then you just sort of then you just don't see them as much, which is kind of weird because they are supposed to be the main threat in the Halo universe.
And CGI wise, they were pretty good.
Yeah, for the most part. But yeah.
But no, so that gets me to that point, right? So we're talking about as fans, right? And so that also became a part of the discussion that only that's probably better to have someone who is a fan of the project be a part of that project, right? Of that thing. So you want someone who at least is a fan of said thing to be in charge of that thing, right? Like I said, this wouldn't happen if a fan was in charge, right? For either the Halo show, Witcher, or what eventually now the conversation is being The Last of Us, right?
Yeah, because I mean, I guess the idea is not necessarily with The Last of Us that the creators aren't fans. It's more of they are very, I guess, belittling to video games as a whole. It seems in terms of how how much narrative they can have. Because obviously the statements they make, it sort of seems like video games are. It perpetuates the idea of video games being seen as like a lesser medium in comparison to films and movies, which is why I feel like a lot of video games, with Last of Us being like I think the biggest example, obviously, wanting to have this more cinematic feel,
which is funny because considering it's The Last of Us.
Yeah,
what we just said earlier.
Yeah, which is like. It's a game that tried really hard to be super story driven and cinematic and that stuff. And then, and it's praised for it. And then, you have these creators for the TV show, these showrunners being like, yeah, video games, you just can't get that same emotion, from like an actual, real living thing in front of you or whatever.
Which in itself, that's a different conversation to have too, right? Because like you could say the same thing with like cartoons, and just basically the entire medium of animation.
Yeah, like it feels like you discount like animated movies and stuff, because I'm pretty sure there's been like the amount of times I've heard people say I cried at the ending of Toy Story 3 or whatever, or the scene where they're in like the little incineration pit or whatever when they're almost gonna die or whatever. To me, I'm just like, well, I mean, listen, people can attach emotions to anything, really, when you think about it. It's how invested you can get into a story, and that's one of the,
Yeah, so like I mean, so I think the best things. I mean, like when I think of that, I think of what Guillermo del Toro recently said with in terms of his movie Pinocchio, is that animation is a medium, not a genre, kind of thing. Because like there's been a lot of moments where even in animation, I'm just like, oh damn, that got me feeling. Even in games, I'm like, god damn, that got me feeling. Like damn, I'm emotionally invested into the story.
Yeah, and it's all about sort of the story and how it's being told and presented is how you get an audience to be emotionally invested. It's not like, I don't know, I guess it might be easier to see an actual human being going through that kind of stuff, but like you can still pull it off with just good storytelling and stuff and that stuff, and it's just an interesting take, and it doesn't. Like, I guess it's very weird. Like, I don't know if, say, what would a fan would say to that, or if they were in a position like of being
head whatever of
like a head showrunner of the Last of Us show. What would they feel? Of like the comment being made like that.
Well, yeah, no, and I totally get what you're coming from. I totally get that. Because like when you hear that, it kind of like bothers you to an extent, right? Like you're like, so like you didn't even play the games and stuff. You didn't even like experience that. If you feel like you like you didn't get that from playing the game, or like feel like it's much that you didn't feel anything because it is a lesser form of a medium, right? Then mine's obviously gonna be better because it's actually a higher form of medium.
Yeah, I don't know. It just reminds me of like I think debates back in the day of like of books being superior to movies because of like you can get the inner emotions of the character, and like you can actually sort of like imagine what it is or whatever in your mind's eye or whatever, kind of thing. And which is kind of weird to me that there is still this weird stigma, I guess, in Hollywood. I'm not sure about like the rest of the entertainment industry or whatever.
Yeah.
But at least from certain people who are in the positions in Hollywood where they feel like video games are still seen as like
something for kids,
right? Even though I'm pretty sure the highest grossing entertainment like thing like in the past couple years, like people like Xboxes, PlayStations, Nintendos, all those things sell way more combined than most movies do. So, like...
I mean, Twitch is a platform itself.
I mean, yeah, heck, Twitch, the whole thing. I mean, I guess it reminds me of, that whole thing back in, like, 2016 where you had Jimmy Kimmel and all these late-night hosts, guys being like, I don't get why people watch other people play video games. That seems kind of stupid. It just feels like kind of like that, where it's like, obviously it's people that don't really understand why things are like, why people have like, or at least sort of the new generation has these sort of like avenues of entertainment, and they're just like, that's weird, that's dumb, you're dumb, I don't like it. But in this case, it's more of like, video games, they're just not emotional, it's just a bunch of pixels. Why would you care about a bunch of pixels? Watch our show, it has real people, real stakes, that kind of stuff, But, yeah, I guess in terms of, like, the sort of fan reaction to it, I find it, like, very interesting in terms of, like, it just feels weird for fans of, I guess, The Last of Us, where they're like, we have this awesome cinematic story that's going to be adapted to a TV show, and it's like, well, you know, like, oh yes, it will be made better because it's going to be made by real people.
You knew this was coming, kind of thing. Well, I mean, like, so obviously now, my question to you is, if a fan, if someone, if this head person, you know, was someone who played the games and talked about how much he enjoyed the game and wanted to bring that to life, do you think it would have been response would have been a lot different from people?
Where if he was more of like, I want to be as accurate as possible kind of thing.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, like, fans are gonna love it when people say, I want to be as accurate as possible to the source material kind of stuff, right? Because there's always a contention of fans who are super, like, by the book kind of thing when it comes to adaptations. I mean, heck, there's probably still members of the Marvel fandom who are a little annoyed that, like, certain costumes don't look the right way in an MCU movie, you know? Or it's like, or they'll just be like, actually, the Mandarin is not Shang-Chi's father.
Or one of those situations where it's
Captain
not like
America should be having scales on his costume. It should have the wings coming out and not be a little sign or whatever.
Yeah, or I was gonna say, like, whenever they don't like it when the book isn't as 100% accurate to the film, right?
Or yeah, like, you know, imagining there's probably some freaking Harry Potter fan or Twilight fan who gets annoyed that the movie isn't, like, showing off, like, a certain bit from the book that was supposed to be super important or whatever. But yeah, you know, like,
and again, that goes back to, like, the question of how do you adapt to something, right?
yeah.
So obviously, because I think that's what it comes to, right? When you're doing an adaptation, you can do it as accurate as you want, or as, you know, try to do it in a way where that's both appeasing to the people who are fans of this, but also bring in new people, right? Because, like, with the book, you can do as much as you want, right? As you can write as much detail or less detail as you want. With a movie, you can only go so far, right? It's just how far a medium can go, right?
Yeah.
So that's one thing I think people tend to forget, and I think, you know, even fans themselves who would probably be involved, like, I want to make sure this looks like the way it looks like in a comic book, or is, you know, described as in a book, and like the people who are making it, I was like, I can't do that.
Yeah, and sometimes it just looks like, even, like, say, with a book kind of thing, right, where they add all these details and stuff. Sometimes, like, in your imagination, it looks one way, but when you actually take all the details and put it into a thing, it sometimes comes out maybe slightly different. You're just like, well, now that I see it in real life, it looks a little odd.
It looks really stupid.
Or yeah, that too.
Or you chose the wrong medium to do it on.
Yeah, you know, it's like, there's, you know, when it comes to, like, people who want, like, one-to-one adaptations, like, sometimes, like, there's just some things that can't, like, that would probably look dumb in, like, the real world, right?
So I was watching a video, right, a while back. I forget what it was, but essentially it was talking about the Artemis Fowl movie, and how in the books, this creature, I guess there was a troll. What they do is, like, they, like, snap their mouth all the way open and they eat, you know, the earth, you know,
ground
and soil, whatever, and, like, it comes out the other end, right? And so when they did it for live action, it looks kind of horrifying, because, like, that's a horrifying thing to imagine in real life.
Yeah, I would imagine.
Yeah, but and it was like, but if it was done in a cartoon, I think it would have been much more, you know, palatable, because, like, oh, it's funny.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I get what you mean by that. I think also sometimes there's, like, I guess I'll pivot away to something interesting that I sometimes see, where it's like, I guess sometimes there's, like, anime fans who get a little bit annoyed by when a manga gets an anime adaptation, and when certain frames don't look, when certain, like, fights or whatever don't look as, I guess, dynamic as they do in the manga kind of thing. Well, they'll constantly compare the manga panel and the animation, like a frame from the animation, be like, this doesn't look right at all. And it's like, well, I mean, in motion, you know, it's going to look different.
Yeah.
You know, like,
well, even then, like, well, there's a difference, like, in where it's done, where the fight is different, but is animated poorly, to whereas the fight is different but is animated well.
Yeah, that's also.
Yeah, because I'm thinking of like that Seven Deadly Sins anime and how a lot of people were upset about how that looked,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm just like, yeah, no, that looked pretty bad. Yeah, yeah, no lie, that looked pretty bad. And then people were like, oh, this is how we would have done. Like, well, yeah, you're just one person. This is a group of team with no time with a very limited time to you with as much time as you want, kind of thing, right? So the apples and oranges kind of stuff. But no, I totally get what you're saying, right? Like there's people who just really want it to be as accurate and as, as close to that story as it is, right? But there's also times where like, you kind of have to, you know, even as a fan, I think you have to be someone who's, if you're working on this, you have to be like, okay, I gotta buckle down. I gotta remove some stuff. I can't be adding everything on here.
Yeah, I mean, and again, it's just the nature of the medium, obviously, right? Of whatever medium you're making it into. There's only certain things you can possibly fit in like a certain thing, and you can't just have like a movie be like 4 hours long. Like most people aren't gonna watch that
Unless it's something they're already gonna be invested in.
I guess, yeah.
Yeah, because I'm pretty sure Dune which was a really popular movie that came out 2 years ago. Was it 2 years ago now?
Yeah, I believe it was like 2021.
Yeah, okay, yeah. And like that movie was fantastic, but they also might have excluded some stuff that you didn't even know, unless you're someone who's like very, who's read the books and can tell you like all the stuff they cut out. But it's still like a very coherent story. It has, a beginning, middle, and end, a rising action, falling action, all that stuff, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that's a really important thing to understand, right? And I always go to like the Lord of the Rings, because I would say Peter Jackson really is a fan of the books, right?
Yeah.
And yes, the books are way different. They have a lot of different things going on and stuff, but you could argue that he did it in a way where it's satisfying as a movie and as a story as well. But like, even though, yeah, they kind of like cut out a lot of important stuff that was needed, whether it be Tom Bombadil or the fact that the hobbits had to go back home and fight and start an uprising of the hobbits against like the orcs, kind of stuff. Which, hey, sounds cool, sounds awesome. Totally understand why you cut that from the movie.
Yeah,
because it's like, all right, we've won, we defeated Sauron, we're heading home. Oh, there's another battle. This war has changed us, kind of stuff, which is a thing that, I totally understand. But I think this one was more of like the journey and the friends we made along the way kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Which is still a good movie. Which I'm not denying it that. And so, but like I'm saying, like Peter Jackson himself, clearly a fan. But he knew what he wanted to do with the story because it was the only way he could essentially adapt it to the live action medium.
Right.
So I think that's something that, I feel like if you are a fan, yes, be a fan. But you also need to at least understand the kind of thing you're working on.
Yeah. I think there is a contention of, I guess, like fan interaction, I guess. Like the fans, I don't know, I guess there's more concern that, I guess, from some people that like fans might be wanting to get a bit too involved with certain productions. I mean, obviously, the one that comes to my mind is the Sonic movie, when the original design came out, and it caused such a backlash that the studio basically had them redesign Sonic to be a bit, obviously more accurate instead of just whatever the hell abomination they wanted to do.
Oh no, yeah, like no doubt. Like if you want to make something that is like I said, made for a specific audience, but still make it in a way where new people can come in, you kind of have to talk to and understand why these people love the product so much. Because like, I mean, we talked about this before. The Sonic movie is not the games. It is not any of the TV shows.
Yeah, and it is interesting. I don't know, because I always feel like whenever people bring up the Sonic movie, it's like, oh, I see, successful video game movie. They've done it, and kind of thing. I'm kind of just like, I mean, yes, but also like it reminds me of like the Resident Evil movies, which you could also argue are successful movies.
Mm-hmm.
And no one talks about those movies being like the ones that ended the video game movie curse or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
Because while they were successful, like they aren't the Resident Evil video games.
Yeah.
They follow
Totally new character.
totally new character who will occasionally meet Resident Evil characters,
which is so weird.
Yeah, and you know, it's really much its own thing. It just uses the Resident Evil sandbox as its own plaything, and you know, for some people, it's like, yeah, I'm fine with this. This is dumb. I'm cool with it. And for probably most Resident Evil fans, it's just like, what the hell? I mean, I guess to be fair, probably people like those movies more than I think the Netflix show that came out.
Yeah,
probably like it way more than the Netflix show. But regardless, you know, the Sonic movie definitely, like, it takes a little bit from Sonic lore, but I think probably the reason why most people are like fine with why it is the way it is just because Sonic lore itself has always been kind of like all over the place when you think about it.
I mean, we talked about this before. Like, we grew up with Sonic X and other stuff, like in the video game wise, and they were all just kind of their own thing.
Yeah, you know, like it's very hard to like get a timeline of the Sonic video game universe besides just 1, 2, 3, and 4 or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Because then you got the adventure stories.
Like, yeah, you got adventures, and you get like some of the other games like Unleashed and Colors, and you know, it's just all kinds of wiggity whacked. But yeah, no, it's just like it is. I'm not saying. I guess I'm not part of the camp that feels like fan out voices should be completely ignored. But at least some sort of like, hey, like, we have concerns. Can you at least listen to our concerns? Thank you. You know? Because at the same time, when I think about the idea of, like, people being like, oh, there's the people who has to work on these, like, projects, they have to be fans, you know? They have to know everything, you know, that kind of stuff. And I started to think about it as, like, I guess the perfect counterexample to that idea was obviously Tim Burton when it came to the first Batman movie.
Yeah, he's not really much of a comic book fan, but like he took Batman and made it his own thing, and like people did not care.
Yeah, people liked it. You know, like people really liked the Tim Burton's Batman. I mean, Batman Returns is a little, you know, that's.
I don't like Batman Returns, but I totally get it.
But yeah, you kind of get why people don't like it, but. It's a bit more. It's more Tim Burton than the studio wanted.
Yeah,
just like you gone too far, Tim. I'm sorry.
And then you get the Schumacher stuff, which is more of him, you know, because he grew up with the. I'm guessing. I'm assuming he grew up with the Adam West Batman.
Well, I mean, the Adam West Batman was pretty popular for the time. Like when most people thought of Batman before the Tim Burton movie came out, they thought of the Adam West Batman, which is why comic book fans were so annoyed. It's like, Batman's not that goofy dancing guy who just, no, you know?
Yeah.
Like, obviously nowadays, like, the Adam West show is pretty much kind of like seen as, you know, we gone back to the state where, like, yeah, it was fun. It was dumb 60s stuff and it was fun, you know? And the comic book fans were a little too up their butts, you know?
Yeah.
About being, you know.
Perish the thought.
Yeah, like. Man, with all the dark and gritty Batman stuff we've gotten over the past few years, it's kind of fun just to have a Batman that isn't like that. But yeah, you know, like, I feel like that. I mean, I could argue maybe Chris Nolan. Like, I don't think he was a big fan of the Batman comics, at least not that I know of off the top of my head. But he definitely worked into just being like, yeah, let's take this and go in like that realistic approach. What would Batman be in the real world, kind of thing?
And so I think this is an interesting thing that I think comics have against like other mediums, right? Is that where comics you can kind of like do whatever the hell you want because comics have been doing that for ages.
Right.
But essentially the idea is that you get to have maintained the essential core of what the comic is about, what the character is about, and all that stuff. You know. And I think that that's the main thing you kind of need with a lot of these, works with, especially with fans, right? From a fan perspective, you want a fan someone who is a fan of this project, but also understands, the limitations, understands that what they can do. And you also want someone who either appreciates and understands why people like this, because like whether or not Nolan or Tim Burton are fans of Batman, they understood the core idea of Batman, right?
Yeah.
John Watts, Sam Raimi, Mark Webb, the guys who worked on Spider-Man, the directors, they've all clearly have a affinity for Spider-Man, but they all have their own little take, but they understood at the core what is Spider-Man. Depending on however your take on on Spider-Man, right? Mm-hmm. But like they both understood at the core what Peter is, what Peter's about.
Yeah.
And I think that's what kind of you need. Like, I'm remembering now that they were talking about, because the 97 X-Men, 90s cartoon of the X-Men is coming back, and they're like, we're only bringing in people who were fans of X-Men. Which, yes, I like that idea. I like that. And I'm glad you guys are doing that. Now, but I wouldn't be against someone who's like, listen, I'm not that much of an X-Men fan, but I get it. I totally want to make sure this is a project that is something that X-Men fans will love, but also people who are not X-Men fans can come in and enjoy. Right?
Yeah, because I think that is an admirable idea. Because at the end of the day, like, realistically, I guess, as time progresses and, as obviously all these sort of things become more popular, then obviously we'll probably get an eventual creative who sees himself as a fan of a work they're working on, right? Mm-hmm. But for the most part, like, I think it's still sort of, creatives who are hired to make these things probably don't know that much about whatever the hell they're making, but they understand that it has a fandom, or at least you hope that they understand it has a fandom, and that they would at least want to, like, give a sense of, yeah, all right, well, we are going to be true to the spirit of the of whatever we're adapting. We're gonna have our own take on it, but we want to capture that same feeling, of why people like this.
Why this is such a beloved thing, right?
Like we understand why this is popular. Let's keep the things that make it popular, but still have it be its own thing.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's a good place to end this episode on. This is the first episode of the new year. Thank you guys for supporting us. If you want to find where we're at on social media, we're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at the Geek Centurions. And we have a link tree on our Instagram where you can find links to all the podcasts that are officially pod up, like Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Pandora, all the like. And you'll find a link to the YouTube for all you audio listeners out there who want to put a face to the voice. Like, comment, subscribe there. And we have a link to a Patreon, which is mostly just there for any kind of support. And yeah, that's it. That's that first episode of the new year. Here's hoping we get some new stuff. We got new stuff to talk about in the coming year. And, make this year another great year.
I just wonder what... I can't think off the top of my head. What is the next big thing that for 2023? Off the top of my head, I can't think.
That isn't just comic book stuff?
That isn't just comic book stuff, yeah.
Maybe is this the year Dune 2's coming out? I don't know. We'll wait and see.
But anyways, guys,
you have a good one. It's been me, your boy Eli.
It's been me, Joe.
You guys have a good one. Peace.